It's now my pleasure to introduce our Lunch and Learn session, addressing the workforce challenges associated with the energy transition in Atlantic Canada. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Martin Luymes of HRAI Canada. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good day so far. I hope you had enjoyed your lunch. I'm the learn part, in case you were wondering. I said to somebody, well, lunch and learn, we can guarantee we're going to deliver at least 50% of that. So hope you enjoyed your lunch. What I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about the issue it's been brought up a couple times already as being a challenge in the sector. I think everyone in the room knows it's an issue. I don't know that everyone maybe agrees on the right solutions, but I can say that HRAI is committed to trying to find what some of those solutions are, and we have a number of projects underway to get some answers and recommend some solutions. So that's what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to do all that in 30 minutes, so hope, bear with me. I might move quite quickly through some elements of this. I want to drive ultimately to what we're going to be doing in Nova Scotia. So first, we have to give the context. Brian Flanagan already gave you the context in much deeper detail than what I'm going to do. But we have to talk about this because it's really what's driving a lot of policy that's creating a market for heat pumps. It's not, they are a natural seller, you might say. There's lots of benefits to heat pumps that recommend them, but most of the sales are being driven by policy through rebate programs, through incentives of various types. What we're facing right now, though, and one of the reasons that's happening is because of the decarbonization challenge. How's Canada doing compared to other nations? We're not doing very well. We're moving in the wrong direction. We're doing the worst of the G7 countries in terms of reducing carbon emissions. And there you see on the right side a sense of what the building decarbonization in homes and buildings, the trajectory that's going since 1990. It should be below the line, it's still above the line. We're going in the wrong direction from the perspective of policymakers and regulators. What's at stake? I don't want to dwell on this, but it's not really just about impacts on the climate and the livability for humans on planet Earth. It's also about financial impacts. The financial impacts that are being recognized as a result of climate events are mounting annually, and the projections are for significant costly impacts down the road. I don't want to dwell on this because I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I'll just say this is what's at stake and why there seems to be such a strong policy push. So a couple of years ago, NRCan, which has largely been given responsibility for this area within the federal government, at least under the previous government, developed what they called a green building strategy. And one of the things that came out of the original consultation document that they shared widely for comment was a comment that said, they're talking about all these various things I just mentioned, but they're saying what we need to see is a dramatic increase in the retrofit rate on homes and buildings from the current 1% per year to somewhere between 3 and 5%. So let's say 4% would be a quadrupling of what is happening today. It is ticking up a little bit from when they published that, but I would say we're not much more than 1% per year at the moment. So what does that mean? Can the HVACR industry deliver on that kind of change being driven by policy? And the short answer is we do have the products. The industry has the products. You'll see if you go to that other room, where the industry is going, the manufacturing sector is going with products. There's a ton of innovation happening. Products are really getting better and better, and the prices are and will continue to decline over time going forward. What we don't have is the people to deliver on expectations. This is a recognized challenge. It's recognized in every corner of this country. It's not unique to Nova Scotia, but there is a unique version of it in Nova Scotia. So now tackling the workforce challenge is going to be a big deal. I think lots of people in government who really don't understand the industry feel like this is a matter of preparing a course to teach everyone how to become a heat pump installer. And how long can it take? Maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks. We all know this is a trades-based industry, and you can't deliver quality training in that kind of compressed time frame. So we need to get to work and train a lot of people. One of the tactics for increasing the supply of qualified people in the sector is to promote the trades. This is, like I said, this is a trades-based industry, and we do at HRAI and lots of other organizations, we promote people coming into the trades. So we've got a whole program at HRAI. This is from our careers website, hvacrcareers.ca. We have a career ambassador program, which some of you might already participate in. Andrew Ferguson, if anyone's interested, contact Andrew Ferguson. If you want to be someone who might go to trade shows or job fairs in your region and be designated a career ambassador, we have all the tools, all the scripts and backup materials to help you to do that job. So we're doing all of that. Nevertheless, the numbers enrolled in apprenticeship programs are not climbing at the rate that policy would suggest we need to see. So we need to take a second approach, and that is the industry isn't without qualified personnel. There are lots of people doing the work today, but many of them don't have the right skills to tackle heat pumps. I'm going to mainly focus here on the residential sector. I'm going to say in the commercial sector, we have less of an issue. Numbers are still a challenge, but in terms of the skill sets required, most skilled refrigeration mechanics are capable. I mean, if they're committed to reskilling or retraining on a regular basis, they're keeping up with the technology. The same is not true in residential. So we can do the promotion of the trades, but we also have to focus on reorienting and reskilling existing workers. And that seems kind of obvious to say that. The challenge is we don't know what people don't know. So we know a little bit about what a gas technician in Ontario knows because we know what the curriculum says. But what do they know after 10 or 15 years of working in the industry? I'm going to reference Ontario here just because we just did the study. I think I could say some similar things about Nova Scotia, but I don't want to be presumptuous. In Ontario, there are something like 52,000 gas technicians and a little over 3,000 residential HVAC technicians. There's a two-tiered refrigeration trade in Ontario. The trade that's oriented and designated for residential work up to 5 tons. So that's like a 10-to-1 ratio. And yet, almost everyone who has a gas technician working in residential is likely installing heat pumps. So, NRCan and Environment and Climate Change Canada were concerned about this a few years ago, and they said, we need to understand how big a problem this is. We're driving investment in retrofits, energy retrofits, the transition, electrification, whatever term you want to use. What does that imply for the supply and demand for skilled workers? So they did a study. They commissioned BuildForce Canada to do a study. BuildForce does publish trades data on a regular basis. They track trends for all the different construction trades. Very good organization. I suggest you look them up. They have tons of really great data. They were challenged to do some projections on what the demand would be for various trades as a consequence of investments in energy efficiency and decarbonization. What kind of people do we need in what trades? That was the high-level question. Their findings proved out the dramatic need for new tradespersons and apprentices in our sector. This is the chart of the expectation on investment in retrofitting, fuel switching renovations, and fuel switching in new homes. That's the dollars. And they modeled all that out and they said, this is what we're going to need in terms of personnel. Now the top category, I didn't show you, the graph doesn't show all of the different trades that they analyzed, but the top category is trade helpers for the new construction sector. That's an unskilled worker category, and when they talked to the home building sector, they said that's what we need. We need warm bodies who can help on job sites. They didn't express a huge demand for specific tradespersons. The second category, that's highest by far, is refrigeration and air conditioning mechanics. When they broke it down, this number I'm going to show you, this is for the whole country, but it pretty much pans out exactly the same in every province, interestingly enough. They said, of all the trades you can see here, they're almost all double-digit increases will be required over the next 10 years. Now, BuildForce told us, by the way, NRCan and Environment Climate Change Canada said, what are we going to need over the next 30 years to get to 2050? And they said, we're not going to project that far. That's a fool's game. We'll give you 10 years worth of projections, and this is what they came up with. And they said, over the next 10 years, the HVACR industry needs to see a quadrupling of the number of refrigeration and air conditioning mechanics. And in that category, they included the residential program that exists in Ontario and Manitoba, just if you're wondering. But a quadrupling is a number that the existing training system cannot deliver in that time frame. Despite all the good work that's being done, they just cannot generate those kinds of numbers. So one of the things that the report also recommended in its conclusions is that we should be focused on reskilling existing workers within the sector. And in Ontario, that meant gas technicians specifically. They were specifically named as a category of trained and skilled individuals that would be ripe for reskilling to embrace the challenges of the residential heat pump sector. So building on that, HRAI talked to NRCan, and we said, look, we need to understand this. As I mentioned already, NRCan and others have funded training programs before. There's lots of them around, but none of them are based on an understanding or an assessment of what the industry really needs. We thought maybe we should start with an analysis, like a study, that says what does a typical technician who is installing heat pumps, legally or illegally, what do they know and what don't they know? And let's figure out what that gap is so we can train to help them overcome that gap and in time become duly qualified as a licensed tradesperson. That was kind of the mission. We got funding from both from NRCan and Environment and Climate Change Canada. We're very grateful to them for the support on this project. The goal was to create a roadmap for reskilling existing gas technicians in Ontario. That was the initial project. It included 3 phases. I am not going to go through all aspects of this because I've done this in a couple of different sessions during our AGM. Some of you will have seen this already. I don't want to dwell on all the steps, but I'll just say very quickly at a high level, the methodology we used is we started by saying, let's not presume that there is a trade that is the sine qua non for everything that will cover everything. Generally, people would presume that's the refrigeration trade, but we put together a committee of experts, including manufacturers, contractors, technicians, and trainers, who sat around the table and said, what does a successful heat pump installer and service person need to know? What are the different training components that they must know to be successful as a technician in the field? That's what we did. It's called a DACM process. So they went through all that. It was a well-represented group. They created a very comprehensive, out of that standard that they created, that curriculum, they developed a bank of questions to do an assessment of existing technicians. About 200 questions, some of them in the category of asking people how confident they are in performing certain tasks that are required tasks as a tradesperson. Other questions, the other half of the questions were actual knowledge questions. How much do they actually answering the question the right way to indicate their level of knowledge? And we tested both G2s, residential gas technicians, and those holding a 313D license in Ontario. They were invited to join. They had to have at least 5 years experience in the field. We didn't want to assess somebody who's fresh out of school because they would have all the knowledge but not necessarily the confidence. We didn't want to include refrigeration mechanics because we felt they would vastly exceed the requirement. We're not really worried about them. It's more about people who are doing the work really illegally, but who in fact are out there and performing most of the installation. So that's what we started with. And the findings were very interesting. First, I'll just say that the findings bore out our assumptions. And that was gas technicians do know much of what they need to know to succeed as heat pump installers. Also told us, though, that there are significant gaps in what they don't know. And those gaps told us where training is needed. So that the gap analysis really proved itself out. We had a much better understanding at the end of what they know and what they don't know. That was the whole point. We also had some interesting side findings, one of which was that residential air conditioning mechanics, people who held the trade license, were far more confident than might be warranted. And on the other hand, when we actually tested them on their knowledge, they didn't perform significantly better than gas technicians. This is how that shows up. The green bars are residential air conditioning mechanics, the 313D license, and the blue is gas technicians. You can see on the confidence scores, the tradespeople, the licensed tradespeople, were much more confident than gas technicians in their ability to perform these various tasks. When we actually tested them on their knowledge, they were kind of on par. This red bar represents what the passing grade would be if they were to, write the challenge exam. And you can see where the deficiencies are. We actually identified these three key areas as being the areas of greatest need, those training on maintenance, controls and line voltage, and codes and commissioning. Those are the areas where people performed the poorest. I don't want to dwell on that. That's a finding for Ontario. The finding might be different for here. It might be quite different in other parts of the country. That happens to be what the data showed for those 100 technicians in Ontario. Out of that, we did a second phase, which was let's actually develop a training piece to help overcome that challenge, those gaps. We worked with a technical lead, an HRAI instructor, who led a team. 3 colleges participated in developing the training, and they developed a course that they, in their estimation, would do the job, which was 8 weeks and 80 hours, a combination of synchronous and asynchronous training, some hands-on labs in those colleges. So that's what we did. We put that together relatively quickly. Some would say too quickly. I'll come back to that. And then in phase 3, we tried to find a window of opportunity between the heating and cooling season where technicians might be open to doing training. We made it available at no cost at 5 colleges in Ontario. We did not issue any certification out of this. The colleges were a bit nervous about it because they said, well, what are we giving people as a result? They're getting a certificate of completion. We are not certifying anyone to do work. We basically said, you're helping us with a study to learn what it is that people don't know, and people participated on that basis. Then at the end of the training, just to test whether or not the training was effective, we used the same tool to do a pre- and post-assessment. So all those 60 people who took the course, they didn't all complete, 54 completed, but we did a pre- and post-analysis, again, of their confidence levels and their knowledge levels. And this is what the study showed. The confidence levels did not change hardly at all. They were pretty much within the same margin of error. In some cases, the confidence level dropped, which is actually what you would expect after going through an assessment or a training piece like that, like a little less confident about their abilities. What was remarkable and very gratifying was that the training delivered very, very strong results in terms of knowledge. What that tells us is it's not perfect, but that in most of the areas where they were deficient in their knowledge, the training worked. Does that mean they're now ready to go to work and succeed as heat pump installers and service persons? I can't say that, but they're closer to that goal than they were prior. So what are we going to do with all that? I'm going to say first, we took all those conclusions to Enter Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada in July, and they were very pleased with the results, and they really thought there's an opportunity now to do some more. Like I said, this is primarily a research exercise. Now the question is, what do we do with those findings, and what else might we do to move the needle forward? So here are some basic conclusions. One, I think everyone agrees, building decarbonization targets will not be met unless and until workforce transformation is fully underway. This is really a critical piece. Without it, we will not hit the targets that have been set. We've always said to government that the industry, the HVAC industry, will navigate the transition, the energy transition, but they likely won't do it in the time frame that government would like to see. We've navigated transitions before. This one's a very dramatic one, and it's all about accelerating. As Brian said this morning, how can we effectively accelerate the pace of change to meet these big policy goals? Now, recognizing and documenting in the way that we did, we also recognize that's only the first step. It's not the last one. So we're just on the first step of a journey here. And the last point is the industry will need assistance from government and from within the industry to train personnel at a scale needed to affect change. So those are some high-level conclusions. Some recommendations we made to NRCan and others, some of which have been acted on, but some are very high level and we think could be solutions over the long term. One is regular updating of training and curriculum should be done to keep pace with advances in technology. The residential HVAC program in Ontario, one of the reasons it didn't succeed in preparing people for heat pumps is when that program was originally created 22 years ago, it didn't really reference heat pumps. It was all about residential air conditioning. Almost all the curriculum was focused on that, very little on heat pumps. So people didn't have all the training to prepare them for the shift to heat pumps in that province. So regularly updating curriculum is key. We also believe that tradespeople, once certified, should commit to continuous learning. Also, again, to move with the times as technology shifts. A lot of people do this as a matter of course, but it's not the norm across the industry. We do believe that in various provinces where it doesn't exist, we need to engage with government to talk about appropriate training solutions for the residential sector, as distinct from the commercial sector. What that solution looks like, who can tell, but we do have 2 models of training that exist in Ontario and Manitoba that we believe are valid and relevant to other jurisdictions. But whether or not that's the solution will be up to local regulators and the industry in these different parts of the country. And finally, we believe that the federal government needs to support reskilling of workers with dollars. Cost of training reskilling should not be borne exclusively by the technician nor their employer because they're doing it largely in response to a policy driver that's been created by government. So we believe the government should therefore fund that transition at least to some degree, if not 100%. Sorry, I didn't put this in the right order. Okay, oops. So our next steps, we do have some more work to do in Ontario. I won't dwell on it. You're not here to hear about Ontario. But we are going to refine that training program. It was done relatively quickly, but what we heard was there's value in this training. Now we need to polish it up, prepare it, and make it available through a wider range of colleges. We'd also like to get recognition with Skilled Trades Ontario that this could be a contribution to help people who want to challenge the exam at some point, not as a single solution, but as part of their journey to become licensed down the road if they so desire. Lastly, we're not done. NRCan, based on our meetings in July, where they saw the results of this, they said we need to do more of this kind of study. So we are going to be doing a gap analysis both in British Columbia and in the Atlantic region to try to assess what the needs are in these 2 other regions that are going head over heels for heat pumps. And we are pursuing training subsidies. NRCan said we'll try this idea of funding training outright, covering the cost of the technical training and the lost time for employers of that technician being in work, up to $1 million. And we're going to pilot that in Ontario. So let me turn to a gap analysis in Atlantic Canada, because that is one of our next steps and relevant to the people in the room here today. Why would we do a different gap analysis in Atlantic Canada? And the reason is the lay of the land is different, right? We can't presume that the findings of Ontario are relevant here. I think they're somewhat relevant, but they're not. You know, a technician who's been working for 15 years in Nova Scotia likely has a different set of skills than a technician who's been operating for 15 years in Ontario. I think it's a safe assumption. What that difference is, we don't know. That's why we need to do the research. It's a different energy mix here, a lot more baseboard electric heat, oil, propane, natural gas isn't king in Nova Scotia the way it is in Ontario, so it's not just about gas technicians. So like I said, the Ontario results may or may not be relevant. We also need to start with what a typical technician knows, and more importantly, what they don't know, to know what training is needed. Do we have an issue in Nova Scotia? I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm going to say based on asking some questions about the number of employees in the industry in our sector, roughly 5,000. The number of refrigeration and air conditioning mechanics in Nova Scotia is roughly a little over between 500 and 600. Only a fraction of them work in residential. Last year, as you heard from Brian, 27,000 heat pumps were installed in this province. And that tells me that if we're relying on skilled refrigeration mechanics to do that work, they were doing in excess of 500 installations per year. Well, we know that's not physically possible. A lot of the work, I don't want to say 80%, I don't want to put a number out there that may be challenged because we haven't studied it, at least not carefully. We know there's rampant non-compliance with the trade regulations in the province. We don't endorse that, but at the same time we have to face reality. There are people out there installing heat pumps. How do we get them into a classroom to learn what they don't know? So that's kind of our mission. And we don't want to have the answer in our, we know what the answer is. We need to study the problem. So who to assess, like I said, is probably just a typical technician, and we're going to work with partners like Efficiency One to determine who those people are and how we might recruit them into this assessment process. The benchmark that we'll set up to train them towards, though, should be the same. We asked that industry panel, that technical panel, they said a heat pump is a heat pump, whether it's in Nova Scotia or Ontario. The skills remain the same, so that what we should expect, the bar that we set for them, should be the same. So we won't have to reinvent that wheel. We know that recruiting will be a challenge. We did find that in Ontario, we needed 100 technicians to make it a reasonable sample that's representative of the industry, and we thought that would be pretty straightforward. We even paid people to participate in the program. It wasn't easy. Technicians who've been working for a long time might be reluctant to go through a process where their skills are being assessed. There's a little bit of ego involved, and it was, let's just say it was a lot harder than we thought. So we're going to need help from partners like Efficiency Nova Scotia, Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency, the Community College, the Union, Efficiency, PEI, and others in the region that we think might have an interest. The results from that analysis here will inform training solutions going forward, which in long term, looking across the country, might vary from region to region. However, we do have I'm going to say, a high level of interest among our residential contractors in this province for the solution that's been used in other jurisdictions. So there is some support for that idea. Whether or not that's the right fit, time will tell. We'll come back to that. But we believe the evidence might support that. The last thing I'm going to say is that at the higher level, we are, some of you who were at the AGM attended our first session. We talked about our 4 top priorities. Abby did a pretty good job earlier of summarizing those 4 in the first panel this morning. On this topic, we are asking the government to commit $100 million for a decade-long program to support reskilling of existing workers. We feel that's what's necessary. We also want the federal government to support the development of appropriate trades training solutions for the residential sector in all parts of the country. Just to support the idea of having the dialogue province by province to figure out what the solution is. We think we have some good ideas, and our members are telling us what they support and what they don't support. So that's a conversation we have to have. And last, I'm going to say, as a driver for all this, one of the struggles we've had is what's the motivation for a contractor? If nobody's stopping them doing the work in the field, like people aren't walking around, there's no trades training police out there. I mean, there kind of are, but they're not doing much in the residential sector. What's the motivation? Like I can get away without the training and still make money installing heat pumps. Nobody's pushing back. We want to drive training and investment in skills development through a reward system. And one of the reward systems we're looking to set up is called Heat Pump Champions, where contractors who have invested in tradespeople, manufacturers training, all the licenses that are required, an understanding of how to sell heat pumps correctly, et cetera, will be designated as heat pump champions. And then what we'd like is that programs like Efficiency One's rebate programs or any programs across the country would point consumers to that program. What we see now, too often, is that contractors show up at a customer's door and they'll say, you know, I know you want a heat pump, I know you've done some work, we're going to recommend against it. In some parts of the country, even in British Columbia where heat pumps are pretty popular, someone told me 4 out of 5 contractors will make a case against it. They're not saying that because they really believe that. It's really because they don't know heat pumps. They want to sell you what they do know. That's a natural tendency. We want to reward contractors who have made the investment in quality to be recognized as such in the marketplace. And I believe that program might be a driver to pull people forward and make the investments, again, when and if there's support from government to do so. And that is it. Thank you very much. I got a minute and a half left. I don't think we have time for questions, right? We're going to go right to the panel. Yes?